Good evening, everyone. This evening, we're going to continue our series over the minor prophets. We find ourselves in Jonah 2 this evening. Last week, we started the book of Jonah. We went over the first chapter of Jonah, and so today we're gonna recap the first chapter. We're also going to dive into chapter 2. But before we do that, let's go to God in a word of prayer. Lord, we come to you this evening once again so thankful for the opportunity that you have blessed us with, that you have presented us with, to be able to grow closer to you, to be able to study your word and to just continue to grow and to learn more. Lord, we thank you for that mansion over the hilltop that we are promised. We thank you for that heavenly home that we are so eagerly awaiting and just striving for. Lord, help us to keep our eyes focused on the prize that is ahead, Lord, and the finish line that is ahead. Lord, help us to not get distracted by all the different things in this world that are around us, but instead keep our eyes focused on you and in the truth that we find in you. Lord, be with us tonight as throughout this study and help us to be able to apply this to our life. Also, be with those that were mentioned in our sick list, Lord, and be with the medical teams that are taking care of them. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So, as I mentioned last week, we started the book of Jonah. We went over the first chapter. And back in college, I had this professor who his rule was everyone in the class had to answer a question. And once you answered a question, you were not allowed to answer another question until everyone else in the class had answered a question. And so the definite game plan was you wanted to be one of the first ones to answer because you didn't want to be the last one because you didn't know what the question might be, and then it's all on you, and you might not know the answer. We're not going to do that this evening. While that would be entertaining, we are going to do a couple, I guess, Q&As to go over chapter 1. But when you look at the book of Jonah and you look at chapter 1, there's a lot of things that happen, and in chapter 2, we're really just going to look at a prayer that Jonah offers up. But who remembers where Jonah is trying to flee from, or where he is trying to flee to, I guess is a better question. Tarshish. And do you all remember he was fleeing for what reason? Why did he want to go there? Because he wanted to get away from the presence of who? From God, right? Do y'all remember how many miles it was in the opposite of direction of the city that he was supposed to go to? 2,000. Now, this is the next question. Y'all probably remember this. What city is 2,006 miles away from this exact building? Las Vegas. Don't you? I mean, you couldn't write a book about it. I should have found another city too, and really thrown y'all off. But Las Vegas is literally 2,006 miles away from this building. So don't get up and leave class just yet. But he was trying to go to what area? Where was he? Where was God telling him to go and present the word? To Nineveh. He didn't want to go to Nineveh, did he? And so he went down to Joppa, and he found at Joppa a ship, and he went out and he paid the fare to get onto that boat to go down to Tarshish, of fleeing away from the presence of the Lord. But what happened when he got on that boat and they got out in the water? A little bit of storm, a little bit of wind. Anybody like wind when you're on a boat? Boy, you would talk about getting seasick. I bet Jonah and the other guys in this boat were feeling it. But unfortunately for the other guys on the boat, what was Jonah doing when the waves started to hit, started to beat against the ship? Ooh, Jonah was catching some extra Z's. He was sleeping down in the bottom, not thinking about the fact that the storm that is hitting the people that he is with, that he paid the fare to ride this boat, are just taking the brunt of the storm, all because Jonah decided to try to flee the presence of the Lord. So Jonah was fast asleep. We can see that in verse 6 of chapter 1. And the captain came down, and what had the captain and the other mariners been doing during this time? And what did they want Jonah to do? They were lifting up prayers to their gods. And they said, Jonah, why don't you offer up a prayer to your God? Maybe he will do something for us. It's almost like their gods were not answering the call, which we'll get to in a little bit later because Jonah is going to mention that in chapter 2. And so Jonah gets up, but they decided that they wanted to figure out why did this evil come upon them. So what did they do to figure out who or why the evil came upon them? They cast lots. Who else was lots cast for, or parts of their clothing? Jesus. We can see that later on in the New Testament. They cast lots, and the lots fell to Jonah. Could you imagine being Jonah in that situation? They start to cast lots, and you're just sitting there like, boy, this is about to get really uncomfortable when it just all falls to me. But Jonah doesn't seem too worried about it. And so the lots fall to Jonah, and they start asking Jonah, why did you bring this evil upon us? This is in verse 8 of chapter 1. They ask him a whole slew of questions. What's your occupation? Where did you come from? What is your country? And of what people are you? Who does Jonah say that he is? He is a Hebrew. And who does he fear? God, right? You can clearly tell by Jonah's actions. I'm joking here a little bit. Uh, Jonah says in verse 9, I am a Hebrew and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. Now, dry land is going to come up here in just a second in chapter 2 when we go over that. And he's also going to find himself in the sea that God also made. And he'll even mention that he's getting hit with the waves that also belong to God as well. And so he says that he fears the Lord, the person, the God of heaven, the one who made all these different things. But are his actions really showing the fear that he claims to have? Unfortunately, no. Now, does he think that maybe he can somehow escape this and get away from it? Possibly, but he's soon to learn that that's not going to work for him. And so they ask him, what have they done? Why? He tells them that he's trying to flee the presence of the Lord. And so they ask him the question, what shall we do to quiet down this storm since you've brought this upon us? And what is Jonah's answer to them? You got to throw me off the boat. That's how we get this storm to calm down. And what is the mariners' first response when they said throw him off the boat? Do they instantly throw him off the boat? No, this guy's paid a fare. You can't just throw this guy off the boat. He's a paying customer, right? So you can't just throw him off the boat. So what do the mariners decide to do? Row even harder. Now, I don't know if anyone else has ever done this. I think it's like 2, 3 years ago, for a charity, I was in a dragon boat race. It is brutal if your team cannot stay in rhythm, which I can't keep rhythm. So it was a challenge for us, and somehow I was the leader of keeping rhythm. Terrible idea. We won one race out of 4. We were not great, but we did win the last one. But when you're going, I mean, you're digging hard, and everyone has to be on the same rhythm, and you're digging harder and harder. There's a specific technique. And so they take it and they dig their oars in even harder into water. And what happens to them, even though they're digging a little bit harder into that water? How much progress they make? They're not making any progress. Why are they not making any progress? Yeah, it got even stormier, right? The waves continue to crash against them. They're not making any progress. Dale brought up a great point after class. You can literally just kind of visualize your head. God's just like got like it's almost like a pinky, like on the front of the boat. But like, I don't know where you think you're going. This boat's not moving from this area until what I have deemed needs to be accomplished is actually accomplished. And so they don't make any. They don't make any headway. They don't make any forward progress. And the waves continue to go across them. So then, what do they decide to do? This guy's got to go. Right. And they've already thrown stuff off the boat earlier at this point. And so they lift up a prayer because they don't want the blood of Jonah to be on their hands. And then they pick up Jonah in verse 15 and they hurl him into the sea. And Jonah at this point maybe even has the thought of, finally, I'm going to escape the presence of the Lord. I'm going to die in these waters, and then I still won't have to go to Nineveh. Because at the end of the day, what does Jonah not want to do? I don't want to go to Nineveh. I don't want to go tell the people of Nineveh the truth that God has told me that I want to go tell them. And so maybe even in a way, Jonah is like, no, please throw me over because this would still get me out of going to Nineveh. And so they throw him out, and the waves come down. And in verse 16, we learn that the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. And we're going to see something about vows here later on in chapter 2. And then as we can see in verse 17, this is what everyone obviously knows about Jonah and what everyone remembers the most. But the Lord appointed a what for Jonah? A great fish. I was really hoping someone would tell me the exact animal and exactly what it was. Could be a whale. When you look at what we see in chapter 2, you really start to have to take the opinion of it's got to be like a God-made kind of fish. Or God just said nothing that of this fish's stomach is going to hurt Jonah, because he's definitely going to have to play some kind of role in this to make sure that Jonah can actually survive what he's about to go through. But Jonah is thrown overboard, and this great fish that is appointed by the Lord swallows Jonah up. And how long does he stay in that belly? 3 days and 3 nights. Who else spent 3 days and 3 nights in something? Jesus did. And when you look at Matthew 12, starting in verse 40, you don't have to turn this, I'll read this through, but Jesus is talking with the scribes and the Pharisees. And in verse 38 of Matthew 12, they are asking them for a sign. If you just show us a sign, we would believe. It's something that Jesus heard all throughout his time preaching. If you just show us a sign, if you just show us a sign, if you just raise someone from the dead, boy, we'd believe. Didn't we hear that before? And then people are raised from the dead and they still don't believe. But they say, Teacher, we wish to see a sign from you. But he answered, and this is Jesus speaking, an evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. Some people want to say that Jonah is just a fairy tale. Jonah is not real. The fish is not real. Jonah didn't actually get swallowed. He didn't get thrown over the boat. Does Jesus give credibility to the story? Jesus says, you have this testimony, you have this sign from Jonah. And then in verse 40, this gives you the real context that the story of Jonah must be real, because in verse 40 of Matthew 12, Jesus says, for just as Jonah was how many days? 3 days. And how many nights? 3 nights in the belly of the great fish. So will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it. For they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, something greater than Jonah is here. Now, what did the people think of the Ninevites? Why did Jonah not want to go there to start off with? Were they nice, welcoming people? Were they from the city of brotherly love, I guess? No, they would not hold that title, would they? The people of Nineveh were not just, your nice neighbor that everyone gets along with, that you go to for sweet comfort. They were harsh. They would punish people. They were not the nicest crew to be around. But here, what is Jesus saying? The men of Nineveh will rise up against you. You have this testimony of Jonah. You have this thing. You're from the lineage of Abraham, yet you're not turning from your ways. Yet the people of Nineveh, who you all ruled off as terrible people, listened and repented at the preaching of Jonah. Yet now something greater than Jonah is here. What's greater than Jonah? Jesus is preaching, yet now they're not turning. And it goes on to mention the Queen of the South and Solomon and things like that. But Jesus gives credibility to Jonah and the story of Jonah. And so Jonah, at the end of verse 17 of chapter 1, is in the belly of this great fish for 3 days and 3 nights. And this is where we kind of pick up in chapter 2, where Jonah offers up this prayer to the Lord. And as we're going through this, you almost have to visualize it, and I'll try to do a good job of trying to, I guess, make as visual as I can. But this prayer, you can almost just kind of visually see Jonah just kind of sinking down in the water and getting to the bottom, and eventually he's going to get swallowed by a fish. You can just kind of see this kind of whole thing making its way down, because he's very visual throughout this prayer. But it says in chapter 2, starting in verse 1, then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the belly of the fish. There's a lot of places that people might feel uncomfortable to pray from. Is there any place that you could, is anywhere off limits, I guess you could say, from praying to the Lord? No, not really. Now, there's some places you don't want to find yourself in. Don't get me wrong. There's some places you'd best not be when you shouldn't be if you want to offer up prayers to the Lord, I guess I could say. But being in the belly of the fish, that's not, on my top 10 list, on my bucket list of places that I'd like to offer up a prayer to the Lord from. I'd rather not end up in the belly of a fish. But Jonah here decides to lift up this prayer to the Lord from the belly of this great fish. And he says this, I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Now, when you go back and you think about times where people have been in distress and they've been on a boat, and Jesus, God, has been in that moment, has calmed the waves, you instantly think back to when Jesus is walking on the water and he looks over and he sees them in distress and he has compassion on them, right? And there's different stories we talked about in our Life of Christ class that we finished up a few months back, but he calls out to the Lord out of his distress. Now, is that the only time we should be calling out to the Lord? Is that of our distress? we should also be praying out whenever things are going good as well. And we're going to talk about that here in a second with Jonah, because Jonah is going to have, when you think about the book of Jonah, Jonah was not scared of rejection during his preaching. He was scared that he didn't want people to respond to the message. Could you imagine if a preacher had that mindset today? He's not nervous about people not responding. He's nervous that people will actually respond, that he doesn't want to respond. That's going to be the gist of Jonah. But he calls out of his distress. We ought to be calling out in times of distress, but also in times of gladness. Because there's going to be all throughout this life, we're going to have hills, we're going to have valleys. But who is going to be there no matter where we're at? God is, the creator of the world. So he calls out. Now, at this time, if I was playing the role of God, would I really want to answer at this point when I've told you to go somewhere? And then now you've done all these things and you're still trying to get away. And now you've been thrown over a boat. Now you've been eaten by this fish that I've appointed to be there. But God still answers. He still answers. I mean, how many times has Jonah now tried to get away from this? What is Jonah's end goal? To get away from the presence of the Lord. And now he finds himself in distress. He wants back in the presence of the Lord. He says, now he's calling out, right? And he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol, so out of the belly of death, right, I cried. It's an emotional thing. Could you imagine? You've just been thrown overboard. You've been trying to get away. You know the storm is because of you. You're now sinking down in this water. If you Google how long the average person can tread water, it's 2 to 3 hours, which seems insane to me. I would not take 2 to 3 hours. I mean, that's a long time. But if the waves are really crazy, he's definitely not making it that long. So he's been out there for a minute thinking about all these waves crashing over, which he's going to talk about in a second. And then he starts this whole going down in the water process before the fish even gets to him. There is a whole emotional thing that's going to be taking place for Jonah. And so he says, out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. He hears his voice. Can God hear our prayers from all different locations? Is a prayer in America just as good as a prayer in another country? Yeah, it can be heard all over. You can't go to too far west, and all of a sudden God can't hear you. You can't go too far east, and all of a sudden God can't hear you. You can't go to the North Pole, and all of a sudden God can't hear you. And you can't go to all these different. God is everywhere. He made all of this. The other thing that we need to think about is that sometimes people will make promises in prayer because they are in distress. And then once that distress, once that trial is gone, it is so quickly forgotten. We can do that in our life, but if you think back to whenever they were leaving Egypt, boy, they were all in when that water is parted, that sea is parted. And then it just in a short little while, they have simply forgotten all of it. Well, he's just brought us out here to what? To perish and die. He's just done forgot us. He's going to bring us out here. We're going to die in front of our enemies. We can't forget the prayers that we are lifting up to God. He is with us during this. And so he hears his voice. Verse 3 says, for you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the floods surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Now, I find it interesting that in verse 3, Jonah here gives a little bit of credit, I guess you could say, to God for, you cast me into the deep. Who really cast Jonah into the deep? It was the sailors. Now, they were essentially doing it at the hand of God, I guess you could say, or at the direction, I guess, in a roundabout way. But who is the real reason that Jonah ends up in the water to start off with? It's Jonah. I mean, you can say, oh, the mariners threw me over. Well, they wouldn't have thrown you over if you weren't on the boat, which you weren't supposed to be on anyways, because you're supposed to be in Nineveh, right? So one decision leads to another decision, leads to another decision. And all of a sudden, like one consequence leads to another consequence, leads to another consequence. You never would have been in a bad storm if you never got on the boat. And you never would have had to been overthrown if the storm wasn't bad. That was bad because you got on the boat because you weren't supposed to be on the boat. And it is a whole trickle effect. You wouldn't be going out in the water if you were never on the boat to start off with. And you never would have been in the situation if you just would have listened to God at the onset, at the very start. So he says, you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas. He is in the thick of it. He is surrounded by it. He says, and the flood surrounded me. All of this is right there around him. You're not getting out of it. You're not just going to randomly swim to safety. You're not going to be able to sit there and tread water. There's none of these things. All these waves and your billows, they pass over me. When we decide to go the opposite direction of God, when we decide to dig our oars in deeper as these mariners did and try to go against the grain, the waves, the billows, all the other things of this world will just take you over. Because you're sitting there trying to fight it by yourself. And we can't. We can't accomplish it by ourselves. Who is the person that controls the waves? God is. Who's the person that even made the waves to start off with? God did. Who provided the wood for the boat that Jonah was on and then got cast off of? God did, right? And who appointed the fish? God did. God is over all of these things. And so all of these things are now surrounding him. He finds himself in this situation. What is going through Jonah's mind? You know, we have this prayer here that Jonah is offering up, but I mean, I would love to just, I guess you can't be a fly on the wall because there's no wall out there, but I don't know, something on the top of the water, I guess. I don't know. Some other fish, some little fish out there just kind of chilling and seeing what it is. What's going through his mind just kind of second by second, minute by minute as all this is taking place? I mean, he finds himself in a bad situation. And now maybe he wants some of the situation because he just really does not want to go to Nineveh, but we don't know that for certain per se at this moment. Sue.
Verse 4, he's again mixed up about how he can be out of God's sight. I mean, he thought going to Tarshish he'd be out of God's sight. And he thought being cast down into the sea, he was now out of God's sight. But, it later comes to, and then, remember, pray.
Yeah, as he goes through and in the verse 3, he's saying all these things, they've passed over me, they've surrounded me. I'm in the deep, I'm in the heart of the seas. In verse 4, as Sue brings up, he says, then I said, I am driven away from your sight. Are you really technically ever away from the sight of God? Not technically. Now, did God kind of drive him into this situation because of the decisions that he made? Yes. Does he have some to add to? Yes.
And now he's gotten what he's wanted, right?
Yes.
Now he finds himself in a bad situation. He's like, and now he's out of the sight of the Lord.
And likely there's no sight at all. It's totally dark.
Yeah.
And he uses Sheol as a metaphorical depiction of the absolute depths of human despair, and he's been there for 3 days.
Yeah.
So to be in utter darkness as compared with light, well, we know what that is.
Yeah. Yeah, when you think about what Jonah is going to experience, and of course we don't know kind of exactly how it was and different things like that. But as you're going down in that water, if you're looking up, if he has his eyes open at all in these waters, which maybe he doesn't, but even if your eyes are closed, you can still kind of sense it. The light is just slowly dimming. And eventually you reach a point where there is no more light. And when you reach that point, I mean, you are in complete darkness. Even you can't see anything. Fish that live in places where the light does not reach, they don't have eyeballs. Why? They don't need them. You can't see down there anyway, so there's no need for them. And those are very, very deep sea creatures, of course. But as he's going down, I mean, you're slowly slipping away. And Dale brings up a good point. Sometimes you get what you ask for. And Jonah literally is getting what he asked for. And what he asked for, he is quickly learning is not necessarily what he wanted. What he thought he wanted was not actually what he wanted. And so as he's going down, he says, I'm driven away from your sight. He says, yet I look again. Or yet, let's see. Yet I shall again look. I wanted to be over here. I wanted to be away from you. I wanted to be away from your presence. I'm in help. I need help. I'm in a bad. Can you throw me the life, the life raft? Can you throw me something? Throw something out for me. I need some floaties. I'm not in a good situation, right? Let this be an example for us that we do not need to wait to the point where we are in this situation, this dire of a situation, before we're like, light bulb goes off and we're like, maybe I should turn to the Lord for help and guidance. He never should have gotten the boat in the first place. We talked about it a little bit last week. When the waves started up, he had an opportunity. When he was initially cast over, you could say he had an opportunity. I mean, he's missed numerous opportunities at this point, and he's just continuing to kind of dig into this situation. So he says in the middle part of verse 4, or the top of it, he says, I'm driven away from your sight, yet I shall again look. Now, some people are going to say you could just never fall away. You just couldn't do it. Jonah says, now I'm going to look. I'm going to. He's starting to acknowledge that I have gone the wrong direction. I have made the wrong decisions. I've not been looking your way. I've actually been turning my back, not trying to see any of this. So now again, I'm going to look upon your holy temple, as it says at the end of verse 4. The waters closed in over me to take my life. He's literally waited until the worst moment, I guess you could say. His life is now on the line, physically on the line, before he decides to offer. He says, everything is closed over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped around my head. Now, part of this in verse 5, some commentators will even start to say, when you get into verse 5 and a couple on, some of this could even mention once he's inside the actual belly. We can go down that rabbit hole. I guess you could maybe play that way. But when you think about this, as he's sinking down, he gets to the bottom. There's going to be all types of things in the bottom. It's not like he was thrown over the water and then the fish just kind of like jumped up and like, whoop, and ate him, like a big old goldfish in some of those videos. That's not, he's going through full-fledged thing. He's sinking all the way down to the bottom. He gets down to the bottom. Everything is now closed in over him, as he says in verse 5. And the deep is surrounding him. The weeds were wrapped about his head. And at the root of the mountains is what it says in verse 6. It's an interesting way to look at it. He's hit the pit of the ocean. He's made it all the way to the roots, as he calls it, of the mountains. He's made it to the bottom, all the way down. There's even mountains inside some of the bigger parts of the oceans that we've not fully explored all of those, but you can see some of these mountains and these valleys in the ocean. He's now down in the roots of the mountains, and I believe I said it last time. I don't know if I'll be able to find it real quick. I can't remember if the sea is 2 or 3 miles deep. It's 2 or 3 miles. Don't quote me on that because I can't find it, but I'll find it after class. But it's not like this is, a couple hundred feet. It is 2 7/10 of a mile. It is almost 3 miles deep, the sea that he was thrown into. This is not like I went 100 feet down in the water. I went and I jumped off, a diving board at 6 to 8 feet, depth, 10 feet depth. I didn't go in an Olympic pool. He's nearly 3 miles to the bottom of this thing, right? 2 miles is a long way. So he's over that. So this is all surrounding him. It's wrapped around his head. He's at the roots of the mountain. He says, I went down to the land. Now, what's the land in the ocean? Seafloor. Well, you made it somewhere, haven't you? Free of charge, I guess you could say. I guess he paid for his fare to go on this diving expedition. But he's now reached the seafloor. The things that have probably gone through his head by the time he has been thrown over the boat and now gone through the waters and then now made it down to the seafloor have to be something. So he went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Now, the bars here, you really could kind of almost make the case that it really could be the teeth of the fish in a way, because the fish is eventually going to close in on him when he gets to the bottom of the sea. And it really could be like bars that you're just not getting out of that. But there's also other things that you could go for. But he says, the bars have closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit. That phrase right there could apply to every single one of our lives for different things. The bars of whatever of life have surrounded me. They've made it to where I feel like I can't get out. The bars are there. It's locked up. I can't break free of whatever I'm dealing with. Whatever I'm dealing with. I can't get out of this moment. It feels insurmountable. The sin it's just covered me. Yet who? It's not yet me. It's not yet Jonah because he's just a great swimmer. It's yet you, God, brought up my life from the pit. Who gets the credit? Who's bringing us up out of the pit? We find ourselves in the pit because we think that it's, I bring myself out of the pit. And that's how Jonah got there in the first place, because he thought he could get away from the presence of the Lord, and he should have known that he could not get away from the presence of the Lord. Um, Yet you brought up my life. It's him that is going to be doing the work. It's him that's providing the forgiveness. It's not me providing the forgiveness for you, the forgiveness of sins. It's not me providing you a key to heaven. It's not me. He brings us up. It says, "Oh Lord, my God." It's personal. Sometimes I don't think we think about that enough. Yes, he's my God and he's your God. He's all of our God. He's my God. He's my Savior. It's a personal relationship too. It's not just some worldwide relationship, and he doesn't know me from Adam. He knows you, and yet even though he knows you and he knows everything about you, your strengths and your weaknesses, he didn't have to look at your resume. He didn't have to do an interview and ask you what your top 3 weaknesses are. He knows your weaknesses. He knows your strengths, and yet what does he still want? For you to spend eternity with him. Dale?
In verse 6, where he says, the earth would enlarge both behind me forever. The Hebrew word for earth is literally the word being dry. And so when you read in Genesis, right, when God's creating anything, he made the dry appear, basically, when he created the earth out of the water. And so Jonah being in the midst of the sea, even if he could get back up to the surface, he doesn't have the strength to be able to swim back to shore. So that the dry, right, the earth has been closed off to him now forever. And Jonah,
Yep.
and the only way he's going to get out of this is if the Lord rescues.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got nowhere to turn. And that's, unfortunately, that's kind of what it takes for Jonah to refocus where he wants to place his strength. Unfortunately, I think we can find ourselves, it's a good point, Dale. Unfortunately, I think we can find ourselves in this situation a lot. It takes a lot of things being taken away from us to realize that I've got no other option. And here's the thing, we don't need to find ourselves in the situation where we have to realize I literally have no other option, because you can prevent that and realize that we can realize that on the front side. We can proactively realize that there is no other option but God, and He is the source of all things. And so we don't have to find ourselves in a situation like Jonah, where I physically know that I can't do anything. And now I find myself in the situation where I know this, and this is my only what? The only thing that can. He could have prevented this, right? And so we can know proactively that God is going to be the only source. Yeah, I don't know how good he was at swimming, but he definitely ain't gonna be good enough to get out of this one.
Well, the pit in Numbers 16 refers to symbolizing divine punishment, and so this is divine punishment that he's receiving. It's not the literal pit hell,
No, yeah,
but it's 3 days of it,
yeah,
and it's hell to him.
yeah. And when you think about Sheol, as he mentioned up in the other earlier verses, speaking of death, death is under the earth. Everything's under the earth. And in Jonah's eyes at this moment, what is he essentially under? He's under the earth. I mean,
He's been buried.
yeah, he's basically been buried.
Yeah.
I mean, he's having. I don't know. I don't know. How many people in here have baptized someone, but we ain't baptizing them 3 miles deep, into an ocean, right? He's getting full immersion into this. He is so far down there, and it's like you're under the earth. You're not gonna be able to see anything. There is no other source, and so he says, "Oh Lord, my God, when my life was fainting away, I remembered the Lord." Again, let this be an example to us that we don't need to wait until this moment. We don't need to wait until we are on our deathbed to come and try to find the Lord. We can proactively do this because here's the thing: we don't know when our last breath is. You may never make it to a perceived, deathbed. It could be before that. We're not guaranteed that moment. We're not guaranteed, the moments that we have now or even leaving this building. But he says, when my life was fainting away, I remember the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple. He's reached the end, essentially. He mentions that he remembers the Lord, and it's not that he's forgot God, right? Because if you take a stance that he forgot God, then why would he ever flee God? Uh, he's trying to push God out of his mind, and I think there's probably some part of Jonah that's like, well, maybe if I just go over here, he'll just kind of like leave me alone, or maybe he'll just he won't punish me for not going to Nineveh, and I'll just not do that. Um, so he knows the Lord and things like that, but he says, my life is fainting away. I've been trying to do this myself. I've been trying to do what I think is best. I've been putting all this on my back. I've realized I can't, and I remembered what? The Lord. You're the source. You're going to be the saving power of this. My way is not getting it done, but your way is.
Sure, what Judas was thinking when he denied Christ and afterwards he killed himself. But contrary to Jonah, who found his way back and repented, Judas could have done the same. And God would have forgiven him just like he would forgive us no matter what it is, crime it is. He would have forgiven Judas also, but Judas couldn't find his way back and sin.
Yeah, that's a good point. She brings up a good point because Judas makes a little bit of extra cash that's he's not taking with him when he goes to offer up the Lord and to have him arrested. And of course, he tries to give the money back. They don't want the money back; it's blood money at that point. And so he goes out and he takes his own life. He's 100%. He has to be filled with remorse. And when you go even a little bit further past that story, and you look at Peter. Yeah, it would be after that story. Yes, right around the same time. Peter denies Jesus. And what happens? It's in Luke's account. What happens on the third time that he denies Jesus? He looks at him. They make eye contact. Now, what does Peter end up doing? Bitter, but he does. What does he end up doing? I mean, you get to the beginning of Acts, and what's Peter doing? He's on fire for the Lord. Now Judas is going to have the same thing whenever he sells off Jesus, so he can get arrested. He's gonna see this take place because he's going to kiss Jesus on the cheek. He's going to see Jesus getting let off. He's going to feel remorseful. But they have two different approaches. And Jonah is going to have a different approach. Now, when you get to the later part, Jonah is going to once again struggle with this whole thing of Nineveh. Um, But yes, God would have if Jonah would have went there, or if Judas would have went there. The same thing with the person that pierced Jesus in the side. The same people that would have mocked Jesus and all those other things. When that first sermon is preached in Acts 2, who's able to accept it? Was it just the people that didn't have anything to do with his trials, or was it for the people that didn't have something to do with his trials and the people that had something to do with his trials? Boy, it was for the guards just as much as it was for everyone else, because it was for everyone, and it was for Judas too. If Judas would have took it, it's a good point.
That idea of it being for everyone is something that Jonah
Mhm.
because of his racism, if you will, towards the Assyrians. They're the enemies of the Jews, they're Gentiles, and he doesn't want to go. What's interesting is that when he tells the Gentiles in the boat that it's his God, right, that's punishing him and it's his fault, and that they should throw him in the sea, they row harder trying to save the life of the Jew. But Jonah doesn't go preach and save the life of the Gentiles and then
Yeah, yeah,
Well, Peter went to save the life of a Gentile, Cornelius. Peter went to do that, but he was as hesitant as Jonah was at first.
at
yeah,
first he was,
Yeah.
yeah. And Ananias, you could say, was hesitant going to Saul, but you bring up a good point because in Jonah's eyes, he didn't think that the folks in Nineveh were worthy of the truth. I guess you could say, and that's all. Well, that'd be a sermon and a half. Um, It doesn't matter what somebody looks like. It doesn't matter what country they're from. It doesn't matter what town they're from. It doesn't matter how much money or lack of money they have. It doesn't matter who their family was. It doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter who they're hanging out with. It doesn't matter what they've done to you. It doesn't matter any of those things. If you have the chance to preach the gospel and preach the truth to somebody, what does God want you to do? Sow the seed. So put yourself in. I'm definitely going over. Sorry, Michael. He said something last time. We'll take like 2, 3 more minutes. Um, cut some off your time. If you think about being in Jonah's shoes for a second, there is a nation that is essentially attacking you, a nation that you don't deem as good. I guess if I don't know who we'd go after right now, if it was America, I don't know. I guess you go somewhere in the Middle East. We would say you could say, oh, so, yeah, you could say, oh, that's a good. Did I mention that last week? I don't remember. Um, Say you have a chance, we could say the person's Osama bin Laden, who after 9/11 and everything else, anybody in the Middle East after 9/11, you'd be like top of the terrible list, right? If you were presented the opportunity and God said, I want you to go preach the truth to Osama bin Laden. Crazy, isn't it? Should we take up that opportunity? We should. And I think the same thing about our political leaders in the world today. Um, I don't care who you vote for or if you like the people in office now or in the past or in the future. If you had the opportunity to go speak to the president and present them the truth, they all need to hear it. I don't care what side of the aisle they're on, they all need to hear it. And we should all be telling them the truth if we had the opportunity, right? And so it doesn't matter what you look like, your race, your nationality, your country you're from, demographic, none of that matters. We are called to go and sow the seed. We are called to go spread the seed. We are called to go and preach to folks. And that's something that Jonah is missing. And I'll finish these last 2 verses. In verse 8, he goes back and he mentions the vain idols. He says, those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love. What happens when we turn to things that are false? What happens when we make false idols? We are forsaking our hope of steadfast love. Who's the steadfast love come from? The Lord. When we put our hope and we put our trust in the vain things, in vain idols, and we can have all different kinds of idols, we are forsaking this hope of a great love, this hope of a love that is never ending. He says, but in verse 9, but I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you what I have vowed I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Who does it belong to? The Lord. Now, we don't know what the vow is that he makes. There's some different things we go into. We're just out of time on it. But he does, and he has reached the main point of all of this, I guess you could say. Salvation belongs to the Lord. And then in verse 10, which we'll finish, and the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah out upon the dry land. He didn't put him out in the middle of the sea, put him out on the dry land, and I bet he smelt wonderfully. And I would love to be one of the people in the sea being like, what is going on right now? And so we will pick up there next week. Is there any more questions or comments, concerns? I don't know.
We are not soul inspectors. We are seed sowers.
Yep. Yep.
Not in soul, we sow seed.
Yeah, that's a beautiful point. And the other thing that I think we could even add to that about just being willing to sow the seed, if your greatest enemy, um, if you're able to get your greatest enemy to come sit in the pew next to you, that's what we should do. So I don't know who you perceive your greatest enemy is or who you think is just so far gone away from God. That should be, if they come in our church building, I got a seat next to me for you. And we should be willing to take that to everybody. So with that, I will turn it over to Brian for a song and then Michael for a 4-minute less devotional. I'm sorry.
619, 619. Where'd Jacob go? Well, there he is. I was just going to tell you, your boat would have done a lot better if the person up front would have known the difference between rhythm and cadence. But see, when you give me a chance, we're living in a very dynamic global environment, and change is constantly happening. Anybody doubt that? There have been more technological advances in the last 75 years than all of time before that. Think about that. The effect of change impacts us all, including the church. I found a Great Smoky Mountain Church bulletin from 10 years ago recently. There were 24 unique members mentioned in that bulletin. 4 of those people are still members of this church. 82% of the people that were members here 10 years ago that were in that church bulletin have either moved away, passed away, or drifted away. Change is constantly happening. If a business does not adapt and change, it will cease to exist. 50 years ago in the mid-70s, there was a little company called Sears and Roebuck. You guys probably remember Sears and Roebuck. At that time, 50% of all Americans had a Sears credit card. 50%. How would you like that market share, having a credit card? Some other businesses you probably remember that are no longer around: Blockbuster, Toys R Us, Pier 1, Sharper Image. You know, they always had the coolest stuff. They're not here anymore. Circuit City, Tower Records, Kodak Film, Radio Shack. These businesses are gone due to poor leadership or not keeping up with technology. Countries are not exempt from change. Over half of the countries in the world today have a population rate below what is necessary to maintain their population. Think about that. Most of these are the rich, developed countries are not maintaining a population rate to sustain their population. So they're going to start shrinking if they haven't already done so. A generation is about 25 years. So many of these countries, you don't change that trend in a short period of time. It's going to take a huge effort to try to turn that around. And countries are trying to do it. It's very, very difficult. You're having to convince people to have more children. You've got to have the environment for them to want to do that. Just a side note, the fastest growing countries are your poor, undeveloped Muslim countries. Technology change is happening in a very fast pace today. Just think about the internet, the cell phones we have, the computers we have, the streaming services. We can find out information on anything we want to in seconds. And we can find just about any show we ever wanted to watch and stream it to our TVs. Some up and developing technologies: digital currency. It's a form of currency that exists only electronically with no physical representation. I have no clue what that is. I have no clue how digital currency works or how to use it. Probably a term you hear all the time recently is artificial intelligence, AI. This is a free public service announcement. Artificial intelligence is going to impact every aspect of our lives and be a fundamental change to the way we live. You do not realize the power of artificial intelligence yet. And it's not going to take another 50 years for you to feel it.
It's already been happening in the background, even though you probably may not have realized it. But in the next 10 years, it's going to change our lives. The next 20 years, we're going to fundamentally live differently. The church is not immune to the challenge of change. Leadership, people, technology. God's word never changes, it's constant. The Bible we have is what it is, it's all we need. But the church is a living organization that has to adapt to change. A healthy church needs strong leadership. In Ephesians 4, starting verse 11, and Jesus gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and teachers to equip the saints for the work of the ministry, for building up the body of Christ until we all attain to the unity of faith and the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of stature of the fullness of Christ. A healthy church needs 3 balanced generational ages. It needs a youth, it needs young adults, and it needs mature adults if it's going to thrive and be healthy. Matthew 28, starting verse 19, we need to go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. We've got to be growing the church with more converts. We need to embrace and leverage technology in a way that glorifies God and builds stronger Christ followers. If a church is going to continue to exist, then we need to constantly be developing leaders, continually be adding to the church family, and be current with our use of technology. Every church member is needed and can contribute to the success of a church. And that's what we need to keep reminding everyone. Everyone in a church is important. Everyone needs to get involved. Everyone needs to be helping their local church. God will bless our efforts. As it says in Matthew 9, the harvest is plentiful and the workers are few. We get our lives wrapped up in lots of different things. We get busy. We sometimes don't prioritize our time like we should. But we should always strive to be the best Christ followers that we can be and help the church be as strong as it can be. If you're here tonight and you need our prayers, if we can help you in any way, if you're struggling with something in your life, if you anything we can do to help you, we have this invitational song to give you a chance to let us know what that need is so that we can pray for you and with you.